Are gathered here on a special, and by the way, we do have interpreter here today as well for our Spanish-speaking audience. Please be free to feel free to pick up an interpreter headset. So we're gathered here calling, this is 2 of 5 of our special Public Works and Budget and Finance Committee meetings, specifically relating to our sidewalk issue. And we are here to kick off a discussion that on the best way to correct, finding a best way to correct a 40-year-old policy that has failed the city. For those who don't know the history, back in the early 1970s, the city council passed an ordinance that changed the municipal code by one sentence. And that one sentence made the city responsible for repairing sidewalks damaged by roots of street trees. And it took only 2 years of a backlog of repairs to develop. And if you look around the city today, it's clear to see that backlog has grown exponentially. It's pretty embarrassing. We all see this. We have experienced it in front of our homes, in front of our businesses. Last August, the Budget and Finance Committee and Public Works Committee convened in a joint session and requested our city administrative officer to report with recommendations for a comprehensive sidewalk repair program. And this policy will help guide the city to ensure that 40 years from now we don't have the same issue that we're facing today, buckled sidewalks. You'll hear from Ms. Stacy Sosa from the CAO's office, who will give her presentation, and I ask you again to please be sure to pick up a copy of her presentation. Today, we're not taking any action. It's important for both of our committees to roll out an education series throughout the city, on all corners of the city. We were in Harbor City last week. Today, we're in South Los Angeles. And we're going to also visit the Valley, East LA, the Mid-Wilshire District as well in the coming month. So this is just for informational purposes only. It's important for us to get feedback from the community, neighborhood councils. We have a number of community impact statements that have already been submitted, and we appreciate the partnership that we have with our neighborhood councils. It gives me great pleasure. We're here in Council District 9 to represent my colleague, who I'm just honored and blessed to serve alongside with in Public Works Committee, Councilmember Curran Price, to give some opening remarks. Please give your councilmember a round of applause. Thank you, Curran, for hosting us.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Buscaino, first of all, for your leadership. As chair, I'm honored to be serving on this, the Public Works and Gang Reduction Committee. And under your leadership, you certainly have been focusing on issues like sidewalks and streets and those issues that really impact quality of life. I want to welcome you to the new Ninth. We're very proud of the Estelle Van Meter Center here. It's one of our resources for seniors and others, and so it certainly is appropriate, I think, that we're having this community meeting here. Sidewalk repair. Certainly a top quality of life issue, whether it's a sidewalk that's buckled or a street curb that's not cut and someone's having difficulty with a wheelchair or a baby stroller or just walking. We have to do a better job. I'm pleased that the City Council has taken some real action, some associated with a lawsuit, but also, Mr. Chairman, associated with your leadership and you're focusing on this issue. So we are in a position where rules and regulations are changing, where resources are being allocated for sidewalk repair. And so we're going to hear about some specific programs, some specific proposals this evening. And I'm excited that we're here to hear your comments, to hear your ideas, your thoughts, your suggestions before the final rules and regulations go into place. And so, Mr. Chairman, again, I'm just pleased to be here with your leadership. Proud to have the CLO working with us, other agencies, city departments, as we strive to create a policy that can really improve the quality of life for the citizens that we represent. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Thanks again for hosting us. You know, as we know, and Mr. Price can attest to this, in our council offices, we on a daily basis get a number of concerns, complaints as it relates to infrastructure, whether streets, sidewalks, trees, lighting. Today, we stood with the mayor to celebrate the fact that we paved our 2,400th lane mile in this fiscal year. That's 2,400 lane miles that we've paved that hasn't been done in city's history and we use the same amount of money that we did last fiscal year. So it's important for us to be more efficient and more effective as it relates to stretching our dollars and getting our bang for the buck as it relates to public infrastructure. And we hope with the presentation today and as we move forward in the policy discussion that we stretch the $31 million that you hear today. You will hear today from the Willits case, a settlement that the city of LA is on the hook for the next 30 years to spend at least, bare minimum, at least $31 million on an annual basis to fix our sidewalks. So how we get there is going to be up to these two committees and the entire city council on crafting a policy that's going to make sense and to ensure that we are responsive to this settlement and also to ensure that we don't leave the newer generation coming up with the same problem 40 years from now. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stacy Sosa from the CAO's office. And again, I remind you, if you'd like to fill out a card to speak on this item, please be sure to fill out a speaker card. Ms. Sosa, thank you so much. You, the CAO's office, the CLA's office, Matias who's here, for guiding us and providing us with these recommendations. Turn it over to you. Thank you.
Good evening. Stacy Sosa with the CAO's office. As you indicated, you requested our office to prepare a report.
Excuse me, can you hear?
Oh, no. Maybe.
Put it up.
Okay. As you indicated, you requested our office to prepare a report with recommendations for the creation of a comprehensive sidewalk repair strategy policy. The basic goals that we sought to accomplish as we put the strategy together were to create a program that would be permanent and ongoing, consistent with the recently negotiated Willits settlement, that would ensure accessibility for residents and share the responsibility for ongoing sidewalk maintenance with adjacent property owners throughout the city. Very broadly, what's proposed here is a policy that would first require the city to repeal the tree root exception, returning the responsibility for sidewalks back to the adjacent property owner, which is consistent with state law, and begin a citywide sidewalk inspection and enforcement program. However, the city recognizes that for over 40 years, we've held the responsibility for sidewalks damaged by street tree root growth. So based on that, we're recommending a two-pronged phased-in approach for the implementation so that this eases the adjustment period as we transition responsibilities. So for residential properties, the city will repair damaged sidewalks and return the responsibility back to the adjacent property owner for any future repair and maintenance. This policy is what we're calling fix and release. And for commercial property owners, we're not recommending the fix and release program. For them, we're recommending a 1-year moratorium on sidewalk inspection noticing, which will allow them, commercial properties, more time to make repairs. Both of these approaches will be consistent with city and state law. Both residential and commercial property owners will be able to obtain a no-fee A permit, which will help to ease the cost of making repairs. And the primary point of entry for sidewalk repair requests will be the city's 311 system. The responsibility for sidewalk repair has long resided with the property owner. This is what state law has said essentially, I think, since 1911. However, it was in the 1970s that the city made the exception to this law for sidewalks damaged by street tree roots. The city did so at the time because federal funding was available to make repairs. However, the funding quickly dried up and the city never changed its law. Concurrently, the city did not begin enforcing its policies and laws, which created confusion for property owners. The tree root exception that still currently exists states that property owners are responsible for their sidewalks except when damage is caused by a street tree. That's the only exception. So, for example, even today, property owners are responsible for repairing damaged sidewalks if the repair is for some other reason other than a street tree. It's just not currently enforced regularly.
So if a tree is on private property and is causing damage to your property, it's a responsibility of the homeowner to fix the sidewalk. Is that correct?
If it's on their property,
Right.
Yes, that would be correct. Or if there's some other issue, damage caused for some other reason, cracking or spalling of the cement lifts for other reasons, then they would be responsible for that as well. So under the Willett Settlement Agreement, the city is going to be obligated to ensure, consistent with current ADA standards, that sidewalks are accessible to the disability community. It requires the city to spend $31 million per year for 30 years, adjusted every 5 years for inflation. This brings the total over the 30 years to $1.4 billion approximately. The goal is to be accountable and transparent to the public and the plaintiffs, and to be responsive to requests that are received from the public for sidewalk repair, and to prioritize pathways of greatest use in the high transit areas and in and around city facilities and other places where people gather, and to address the worst of the worst sidewalks. We also are going to provide cost-effective stewardship of public funds as we move forward with implementing the Willett Settlement. The city does have a variety of options for achieving compliance, such as just switching back to a sidewalk noticing and an inspection program, point of sale, point of permit, point of service, cost-sharing models where the city pays for half of the repair and property owner pays for the other half, or the city could pay and conduct all repairs, or another option is the fix and release option that we're now introducing. And based on a survey done several years ago of 82 cities across 45 different states, the majority of cities share the financial responsibility for sidewalk repair with property owners. So this concept of sharing the responsibility financially for repair is not a new concept.
And Stacy, for our audience, can you explain the difference between the point of sale, point of permit, and point of service?
Yes.
As one of the options.
So some cities choose to have a point of sale program where when you sell your house, you would be required to have a sidewalk inspection, and somebody would come out and inspect your sidewalk. If it were damaged, then you would be required to repair the sidewalk before you could complete the escrow process. So that would be a point of sale program. A point of permit program would be when you're starting new utility services that would trigger an inspection, and you'd be required to have your sidewalk inspected and repaired prior to beginning your utility services. So those essentially would be triggers for a sidewalk inspection, which would then trigger repairs if necessary.
Can you just review again what happens when a tree root destroys the sidewalk? It happens all the time. Let us know what the policy is now, how the policy would change, or would it change for that situation?
So we're proposing that the policy change. However, we're proposing a phased-in approach. So we would repeal that, but so when we start the program, when we go out, if you're a residential property owner and your property has sidewalk damage, then the city would repair it first And then after that, any future damage caused by tree roots would be your responsibility, and for commercial owners, they would be responsible for the repair financially.
Are we distinguishing a different policy with residential versus commercial versus a church or some other nonprofit organization?
So I think that you're asking about nonprofits. They would be treated probably the same as commercial properties.
Thank you.
So overall, our recommendations included in the report are to reestablish a sidewalk and inspection repair program that's consistent with the Willett settlement. We would designate the Board of Public Works as the body to oversee the program, with the city engineer as the program manager. We would return responsibility gradually over time for sidewalk repair to the adjacent property owners with the fix and release policy. We would also develop a tracking system for sidewalk repair requests. This would be our asset management system. And we would appoint an ADA coordinator for the pedestrians right-of-way. We would also provide assistance to property owners initiating repairs by creating a pre-qualified list and or bonded contractor list for sidewalk repair. And we're going to continue our policy of waiving a permit fees for sidewalk repair. So currently, when you repair your sidewalk now, right, you're required to pull an A permit.
Yeah, that's something that we led on the city council, that, if you're going to make an improvement of the infrastructure, why are we going to ding you with the permit fee? I'm happy to lead that effort. Can you share with us the average cost of those permit fees that the residents are saving, like $350, $400?
Approximately. There's some standard fees, and then it also depends on the size of your repair.
The repair itself.
But roughly $300
okay,
and up. We would also create a plan for the urban forest to ensure that trees remain healthy and vibrant, as they're an essential part of our city infrastructure.
So that's for every tree that you remove, you have to replace it 2 to 1, and then protected trees?
For the protected trees, it's 4 to 1.
4 to 1. Okay.
So as we go through with this program, since for residential properties, the city will be making those repairs. If it's necessary to remove a tree, then the city will replace those trees as needed. So we believe that this is a reasonable approach to move forward. The status quo has not been working with the city's limited resources and the confusion over sidewalk responsibility. This summarizes our general recommendations that are included in our report, and David Hirano and I from the CAO are here to answer any additional questions that you have.
So this just for clarification, we have already are spending, if I recall, what's this fiscal cycle on 75 million?
So this year we had $27 million.
We've advanced $27 million on repairing sidewalks in front of city-owned properties.
Correct.
Right? Libraries, parks, police stations, fire stations, right?
Yes, so we've already begun repairing the sidewalks that, as property owners, the city is responsible for to allow for access to many public facilities.
And per the settlement, we have to take action on this policy by the first of next year, right?
Not necessarily per the settlement. I think we need to begin spending our money under the obligations of the settlement as soon as it's approved by the court, which I think is going to happen in the next 6 months.
Your report indicates establishing a sidewalk repair trust fund. Can you tell us the purpose of that trust fund?
So given the large financial commitment that the city is having to make on an annual basis, it made a lot of sense for the sake of transparency to establish a special fund. So we recently just went through the process of creating the ordinance necessary to establish the funds, and this will help to ensure maximum transparency with the $31 million.
And I asked you this last week, just for those we have some business owners in the audience. Why are we treating the residential and commercial properties differently in your proposal?
Yes, so we do propose treating property owners differently depending on what type they are. Anecdotally, it's believed that most of the damage caused to sidewalks is caused by tree root growth. And also, we believe that the majority of street trees are planted in residential areas of the city. So this is kind of our way to take responsibility for a lot of the damage. Also, commercial property owners and operators of multifamily housing developments have an obligation under ADA and state law to provide accessible spaces. Commercial sidewalks also tend to be larger in size. Usually they're wider or longer than residential sidewalks and therefore more expensive to repair. And we also took into consideration that for residential property owners, there may be fewer financial mechanisms available for financing repairs, and typically commercial property owners may have more options when it comes to financing costs for repairs of this nature.
Okay. Talk about, if you can, the sidewalk inventory. We are told that 40% of our sidewalks are cracked or buckled. How real is that? A couple years back, the proposal was to spend $10 million on creating some technology to identify all the broken sidewalks, which we turned down. It was too much, and we feel that with technology in place, we'd have to be able to use other means, like the 311 system, using neighborhood councils, using the trip and fall payouts as those locations.
So what we have proposed here is we're not recommending. In prior years, there's been discussion about doing a large-scale sidewalk survey, but the dollar amounts, estimated costs for that were in the 10 million range, which seems like a lot. This time, we're not recommending a large-scale survey. What we're recommending is that we would put together an asset management system as we begin the sidewalk repair program and the inspections, and compile as we go a list of where we're repairing sidewalks, what locations have yet to be repaired, and this would be visible to the public, and it's also one of the requirements of the Willett settlement. So at the end of the day, as we go, we'll eventually have mapping capabilities, and you'd be able to see what sidewalks have been repaired and when they were repaired, and which sidewalks have yet to be repaired.
Thank you so much. It's great to be joined by the Chair of Budget and Finance, Chairman and Council Member Paul Krikorian. Thank you, Mr. Krikorian, for joining us. I'll turn it over to my colleagues for any questions.
Talk a little bit about just the whole rationale of transferring the streets of the sidewalks, I should say, returning them to the responsibility of the property owners. Was it just a matter of finances? The city just couldn't afford to do it? Initially, wasn't the property owner responsible for the sidewalks?
So I think we kind of looked to how other cities approach sidewalk responsibility. We look to how other cities approach sidewalk responsibility. We look to the state laws that have been in existence for many years, and what they say relative to sidewalk responsibility. And we really we're trying to put together a proposal that would be fiscally sustainable in the future, and by sharing the responsibility with property owners, we feel like this will allow for the long-term sustainability of sidewalk repair.
And walk us through the timeline again. If when this project is approved, the program is approved in council, what's the timing for the actual implementation?
So once council decides how they'd like to proceed with these policies, then the city departments would come back with any staffing requirements that would be needed for implementation once those decisions are made. So roughly it would be, I think, beginning of next fiscal year or January, as early as I think January of the next fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. No other questions?
And just to be clear, the majority of cities up and down the state of California, the property, the responsibility of the sidewalk repair falls within the property owner. It's just, again, going back to the policy decision back in the early 70s that the city took upon themselves any sidewalk damage caused by street trees, their roots. The city took on that responsibility.
Yes.
And that because of the federal funding that came in and that dried out after 2 years.
Yes, so we changed our policies because of the federal funding that was coming in at the time.
Okay. Mr. Krikorian? You're good?
I'm fine.
You're good? Okay, do we have the questions that were written out by some of the audience members?
No, Mr. Chair, we haven't received any yet.
We have cards here, and I now turn to...
Are we taking written questions,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, if we can write out those questions, it'd probably move this meeting a lot smoother.
So they have an option, either writing it or...
Writing yours? Do you have a card? Is there a question card out there? Thank you. There we go.
You need a card? You need a card?
We'll continue to flip those cards around, and in the meantime, I'll turn to our speaker cards.
Well, while we're getting ready with the question cards, just if I could ask
Can you up his mic?
one
please?
question.
Mike?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. The street tree exception that took place in the 70s was based on the idea that if street trees were planted in the public right-of-way by the city or pursuant to the city's instruction and that caused damage, then the city should bear the responsibility for that. Is there any way that we can track now which trees are actually street trees and which are not?
That would be very difficult to track. It's my understanding that we don't have a complete inventory of trees that were planted by the city versus maybe a resident without a permit.
Okay. I'm sorry, my mic, I guess, wasn't up. The question was, because the street tree exception that was adopted by the city back in the early 1970s was based on the concept that if the city is planting trees in the public right-of-way or requiring that those trees be planted in the public right-of-way, shouldn't the city bear the responsibility when those roots cause damage? But the question that I posed was, can we even determine now who planted these trees that are causing the problem? And the truth is, we cannot, because there's no comprehensive list of which trees were planted by a homeowner 25 years ago, which were planted by the city, which are required pursuant to a development agreement, and so on and so forth. So the underlying justification for the tree root exception has kind of become a jumbled mess over the last 40 years because we don't have that ability to track where these tree roots are in fact coming from, whose responsibility the tree roots are.
Thank you, Mr. Krikorian. If I can invite Alex Acuna to speak, you'll be given 2 minutes. Again, as a reminder, there's no Q&A back and forth. This is speaking on the item before you. Thank you, Mr. Acuna.
Thank you. Hey, all. My name is Alex Acuna. I'm a member of ACE. Is this also time for questions as
We
well?
we'll address some of the cards.
I'll just get this to you later.
Okay.
Well, yeah, so in general, I mean, a lot of our members in ACE, we talk about the issues of trees and sidewalks on a daily basis. I mean, this is when we talk to people in the neighborhood, they're among their biggest concerns. And the fact that, it's great that the city is going to be investing all this money back in sidewalks. I mean, that's great. You know, we got to make sure that it gets to the right place, and that you know, places where these services tend to be ignored, especially here in South LA, we need to make sure that people here in South LA get the services that they deserve. It's concerning that the city would do this point of sale, or this it's called the fix and release model, because you know these sidewalks are going to get messed up in the years to come. You know, it's great that you know, you're going to fix them now, but the trees are going to continue to grow, and I mean, we're seeing right now that the trees aren't being trimmed as it is, and so you know, the city really needs to continue to invest that money in these services, and to put that back on the property owner, I don't think is right, especially for people who can't afford to fix these sidewalks themselves. So that's all I'll say right now, but I'm sure I'll have more to say later.
Thank you so much. Simone Newman, welcome. She'll be followed by Peter Griswold.
I don't think this works. Here, and I came tonight because I was concerned with some of the issues that were being brought up and the goals that are set forth, such as the fix and release policy. It's not working.
There we go.
Oh, okay. The fix and release policy, and my biggest concerns are about the trees. I have a 100-year-old tree in front of my house. It's a weeping willow, and it hasn't been cut in at least 10 years. I understand that the fees are being waived for the permit, which is $275, I believe, but the estimate to get this tree cut is over $7,000. And if I wanted it totally removed so that it would stop causing problems to the sidewalk, it would be in upwards of $15,000. I have a 21-year-old who's in college, and that's about a year and a half worth of her college tuition, which if the city has millions of dollars and can't afford it, how is a resident supposed to afford these types of fees? And if the sidewalk is fixed and then it's released into my care, how do I prevent the future of the sidewalk being messed up again when the tree is huge and it remains still standing? And these are my biggest concerns for these sidewalks. And also a concern of mine is my insurance. Will my insurance policies on my property go up once the sidewalk is basically given over to me as my ownership, then, and it's a public right of way, then does the insurance fall on me as well for people that are just walking up and down the street? If someone trips and falls on my property, who's responsible? So these are my concerns. Thank you.
So in a situation, we can let's address that. So in a situation like what Ms. Newman indicated, it's my understanding that that tree would be removed. That tree on the sidewalk, on the city's right of way would be removed. That's because the tree is causing. It's obviously the root cause, literally, of the buckling sidewalk.
If the sidewalk could not be repaired so basically, in order to repair the sidewalk, if we needed to remove the tree in order to effectuate that repair, then we would do so. They would look at things like root pruning, but sometimes you're unable to do that because if you did that, then it would destabilize the tree. So in an instance like that, it would probably likely be removed, the tree, by the city under the fix and release policy.
Thank you. Peter Griswold, welcome. Followed by Herman.
Well, government bureaucracy is a terrible thing to suffer. You know, back in the 70s, they should have given it back to the residents the first chance they got. Some routes are much more dangerous than others. I would guess that about 15% or more of the trees have to be removed. Last February, I gave a low bid to Lanny, Los Angeles neighborhood. I forgot the I. Initiative. That we're allegedly helping the city. It's not going to be that expensive to properly give the information on where those bad tree roots are. The meter readers from the Department of Water and Power, the rubbish trucks from sanitation, and the customers themselves, with an additional little form that's included in their bi-monthly bill, can submit information to the city, and they would use that and aggregate it so that a crew, a team of people, will be able to put a good plan together. Many of you have been hearing about the Times report by Steve Lopez, 16 September 2012, where I had volunteered to put such a study together for free. With Department of Water and Power, we repaired about 28 of those conditions around Department of Water and Power, fronting Hope Street. The construction industry, where I'm aware of the documents and specifications, can confuse otherwise capable contractors, but using grids for a single or multiple contract can simplify and prioritize the work scope. Many contracts can be issued to many contractors to employ more people to get the work done according to the priority that is necessary. One priority should go to the locations that have been sued in the last few years, because most of them probably come from the lawsuits. Of course, there's a lot of other places that are really terrible, but like I said, if you use people who go by there every day, they can document this, send that information into a team that will collect it.
Thank you.
I'm out of time.
Thank you, Mr. Griswold. Great suggestions. This is exactly why we're holding these field hearings. Really appreciate your insight. Herman.
Yes, I enjoyed Ms. Newman's comments. I can educate a lot of you a little bit that under the Department of Justice in Washington, if you apply for the application to file a case against the city, although you're not disabled or elderly, you have a right, and they'll come out and investigate why you're being overcharged to repair your sidewalks and streets. Because I brought up a nice case regarding a park called Hazard Park in Boyle Heights, where certain individuals on this panel here said that I had no right to take my wheelchair brother to the park. I had to go to a different park. So now I've got a investigation team from Sacramento, thanks to the Department of Justice in Washington now, who has them with their arm behind their back, saying to them they're going to fix all those sidewalks, which they are now at the park, getting all brand new pathways to the games and events, the picnic tables, getting a brand new restroom, brought in the sidewalks, brand new sidewalks from one end to the other of the block for public transportation. Right. But here's the point. Property owners should not have you retaliate against them for the potential future cost of anything. We pay enough in taxes every day. And on top of that note, unanimously, the facts of this challenge to fix sidewalks and streets repairs, it's always been your problem. It's an ongoing maintenance. The moment you alter, fix, or correct any sidewalk or street with ramps, curb cuts, and so forth, you're responsible, not the public. Don't gut us out of more money. We're struggling enough, especially in the poor communities that we all grew up in and live in. So the advice is this. I plan to bring a second lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles for not meeting my criteria of not being able to safely commute on public sidewalk and streets around City Hall, because the trees are uplifting the curves, I'm tripping on cracks, and there's no reason for that. And none of these people in this community should have that same problem as I did.
Thank you. Wayne, followed by Margaret Peters.
So it's good that you want to take and force somebody to accept ownership of something that they don't want. So to have a deed, to have a transfer, there must be a tender and there must be an acceptance. So if the homeowner is not going to accept your gift of a defective sidewalk and the insurance costs, what are you going to do then? So if you deem it to be a forced liability, that is a taking without just compensation. And the city could be sued for inverse condemnation. Also, it is a tax. It requires a vote of the people by 2/3 because this is a tax, because our rates for insurance will go up, or we would be forced to ask an insurance company to cover the costs of insuring your defective sidewalks. Also, there's the issue of access. Meter readers, the public, come onto these sidewalks, and they have to use them to access utilities, including cable companies and cell phone companies. Those may not be covered by insurance. You must allow the people on a ballot under Proposition 13 and Proposition 208 to have a plebiscite and a requirement that 2/3 of the voters of the city of Los Angeles pass this scheme to become law. You cannot do it by a simple majority. You cannot do it by unanimous consent, because I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to accept your gift. I'm going to send your gift back and say, no, thank you. Continue to have liability. I'm not going to accept the liability, and I don't think any homeowner in their right mind should accept the liability. This is a scheme, a scam, and you should be ashamed of yourselves ever proposing this.
Margaret Peters, welcome. She'll be followed by James Johnson.
Good evening. I am representing my neighborhood council, Southwest Area Neighborhood Council, and we realize, the stakeholders and the board realize, that decisions are data-driven. We've been asking for the results of the Public Works Survey that came out, gathering information and opinion in regards to what the public thought was the best way to handle sidewalk repair. And I'm curious to know if those results were ever disseminated and what part did they play in the CAO's recommendations. My neighborhood council also conducted a survey, the results of which are available on our website at southwestnc.org, which are the results of which are contrary, again, to the CAO's recommendations. That being said, my neighborhood council, the average homeowner has been in their home for over 30 years. We've got older residents with fixed incomes, yet you're talking about a fix and release. Well, yeah, you fix them, but what is a fix? You know, how is the CAO defining a fix? Is it going to be for 5 years? Is it going to be for 10 years? What materials are they going to be using, et cetera? These things haven't been talked about, and that's something that needs to be said. With, you know, my neighborhood council has is $4,000 per capita, making less than the city overall. So you're asking homeowners on fixed incomes, with, you know, don't have the income that maybe other residents do, to be responsible now for sidewalks in what, 5, 10 years? So again, these are issues that I think need to be addressed. Again, if you could really elaborate on what a fix is, that I think is the most important thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. Thank you for your service to our neighborhood councils. James Johnson, welcome. Mr. Johnson will be followed by Stephanie Campbell.
Thank you, Councilmember Buscaino, and welcome to all of you. I know that, like many of you, you have busy days as well, so to engage with the public on this important issue is appreciated. All I want to say is this. Outside of the modernization of LAX and the school building program with LAUSD, arguably this will be one of the larger public works projects in a couple of generations here in the city of Los Angeles. Local 721, along with a number of our allies, including ACE with the Fix LA Coalition, as we enter into this debate, obviously we'll deal with the issues at hand, who pays for what and all that, because obviously it's important. But what's also critical is who does this work. We're obviously in a community that, like many communities in Los Angeles, still suffering through the economic crisis in 2008, although there's been some progress. But obviously, you look around, people need jobs. We need to make sure that as we engage in the policy discussion around how we're going to do this, we need to talk about who's going to do the work. I'll be blunt, we're concerned about what we've heard from some folks saying that, oh, these folks are too expensive, these folks are not, yet if it's about making sure that the work gets done right, we got to deal with that reality, and that's just the real deal. If you want it done on the cheap, you'll get it done on the cheap. If you want it done right, it'll get done right, and we need to have that policy debate. And we're prepared, more than you know, to have that discussion because it's long overdue. There's contractors from tree trimming all the way down that are pillaging this city. And it's not city workers that are pillaging, it's contractors that are doing that. And as we enter into this discussion and frankly debate on this whole issue about who does what and where we're going to go on sidewalks, it's a debate we welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Stephanie Campbell, welcome. She'll be followed by Carter Spikes.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Stephanie Campbell. I'm a member of the Can-Do Neighborhood Council. This is our area right here, but I am not speaking for the council. I'm speaking as an individual, as a resident of this area. I live like a block and a half from here. And just to add something to it, I can't remember what council person said. It was something about they didn't know where to start with in terms of where the trees came from and how the trees came and who planted them. I will just say that what I remember is so it must have been in 1976, we got from Avalon all the way to Central, from, if I can remember, at least from Florence to Manchester. On the south side of the street, we got these, what do they call them, centennial trees. So I don't know if that's a point where you guys can research where the trees came from, how the trees got to Los Angeles. I don't know what happened in other parts of the city, but I do know what happened over here. It was 1976, and, I was that age a long time ago. So I don't know if that helps, but thank you anyway.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for your service as well to our neighborhood councils. Carter Spikes, your pass. Thanks for joining us. Manuel Ariano. Manuel?
Good evening, honorable members of the LA City Council and community guests. Listening to the discussion this evening, it is my understanding that the city of LA is willing to remove trees with destructive roots, such as jacaranda trees, when a resident replaces damaged sidewalks adjacent to their properties and plant replacement trees with sidewalk-friendly roots. That's what I understand hearing this back and forth.
Thank you. Pastor Patricia Strong, welcome.
Good
Welcome.
evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for having this meeting.
Thanks for joining us.
But I am a little disturbed because of the safety of these trees that the city has planted. And I'm saying that because I'm sure we have records somewhere in urban forestry or well, it's a question, so I'm not gonna, it's a comment time. You should have records of when these trees was planted and who planted them. These trees are so humongous that our church foundation have shifted entirely. And if it shifted a church, I'm sure it shifted homes. Not only that, it's the safety. Our trees are so large that our parishioners are fearful at night from gang members, graffiti continually being on our church, and the sidewalk. I had a member to fall from the sidewalk. So I'm saying to you that you should be able to track who planted those trees if we have the kind of record that I'm feeling that the city of Los Angeles, the Angel City, should have records of who planted those trees and take the responsibility where the responsibility lies for the safety of us. And we need that. And I know we have a group of ministers that are coming together in regards to this. And please keep us abreast of what you do before you do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, keep us in your prayers as we're putting together this policy. Appreciate your insight. It's a new day in the city, and this is why we're here today. So we're not leaving this problem to our future generations. So I appreciate all of your comments. At this point, we'll turn to the number of questions that were submitted, and I'll ask Ms. Sosa, do you need a couple minutes?
Could I have a couple minutes?
Yes. We'll turn to public comment. These are cards, general public, general public comment. These speak on non-agenda items. We'll invite Herman and Wayne for 1 minute each. Michael, 1 minute.
Oh, you're so selfish. 1 minute. It's all right. I am used to it. Well, the whole situation here, folks, is this. We're all entitled to these entitlements of what we pay for, and obviously the city of Los Angeles wants us to dish out more, and I don't believe we should. They postponed many projects for infrastructure, which would repair our sidewalk, our bridges, and many of our parks and large facilities, and we never received them. So we got chump change out of it. And I have to put it so frank like this because you get tired of the redundancy of malicious lying right in your face, straight out in your face. They tell us lies. They did this, they do that. But the bottom line is, as I heard from you, you have the same problems I experience in Boyle Heights or in Van Nuys where I live, and where else, in Encino. So I have no shame in that game. All I want is what's respectfully given back to the people so they can have safe access under the regulations of the American Disability Act, Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you. Wayne?
Yep, City Hall, same old City Hall. There to do the bidding of the people. No, it's actually just to take a bankrupt city and transfer some liability to the city. But every homeowner should record on their property a notice of objection and non-acceptance of any sidewalk. That's a gift you don't want. It's like when somebody hands you a stolen handgun. Here, I say, no, get that away from me. But if they put it in front of you and you put it in your handbag, you've accepted it. So your clever little lawyers have come up with a way where the public will be deemed to accept liability if they don't object within a reasonable time. So that's how you're trying to get around it. So the homeowners need to go. Definitely real estate attorneys need to be consulted on how to file an objection so we don't accept this liability.
Thank you. Mr. Krikorian had some comments. Then I'll turn it over to the CAO for the questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Buscaino. I just wanted to comment on a few of the things that some of the members of the public had to say. First, Ms. Newman, your discussion about your 100-year-old tree, I think is a terrific example of one of the central problems, or challenges that we're going to have in shaping this policy citywide. There's no way around the fact that if we are going to ensure safe access on sidewalks, it is going to result in the loss of quite a lot of trees. And I want to make sure, particularly because the most damaged sidewalks are in older communities, one thing that I want to make sure that this policy results in, does not result in, I guess I should say, is to have a lot of repairs done on sidewalks in older communities where the sidewalks are more damaged, and have the result of that be the deforestation of older communities. That's not an acceptable result to me. So when we have situations like yours, which will be many of these cases, we have to look at alternative building materials. We have to look at alternative ways to repair the sidewalk other than a straight line and a 4-inch thick slab of concrete. We have to look at ways that we can preserve as many trees as we can preserve, and when we can't preserve them, there has to be a tree replacement strategy built into this so that we actually add trees rather than detract from the urban forest. In my view, that's critical. A number of members of the public talked about liability and what will this policy do to the liability of the property owner. And I think we need to be clear in distinguishing between responsibility for repairs and liability under the law. If the concern is liability for lawsuits, that is not something that the city determines one way or the other. That's a function of the common law. It's a function of state statutory law and otherwise. We can't impose upon a homeowner liability to third parties. It's just not within the power of the city to do. And right now, as I understand it, and I'm sure the CAO will correct me if I go astray here, right now today, the sidewalks are built on easements in the public right-of-way that are on the property owner's property. So if someone gets injured in a sidewalk injury, today they could sue the property owner for not maintaining the sidewalk. Today. They typically sue the city because we're the ones with the deep pockets, and we end up paying as a result some $2 or $3 or more $1 million a year in trip and fall cases on sidewalks. But that doesn't mean that the property owner is not currently liable to third parties. They are. And so that's, and somebody I hope will correct me if I go astray on any of this, but so shifting, whether or not we shift responsibility for paying for repairs in one way or the other will not impact third-party liability. Ms. Peterson asked what it means to fix in a fix and release program, and I think that's one of the categories of issues that we're going to spend a lot of time this summer in the coming months trying to work out. I think the CAO's proposal, if I'm not mistaken, says it would provide a five-year warranty for repairs. That's just the CAO's proposal. That's a beginning point for our discussion. Even if we adopt a fix and release proposal, it might include a significantly longer warranty. It might include other options that a property owner would have for maintenance after the initial repair. None of this is set in concrete, excuse the pun, at all. And then, Mr. Griswold, I thought you had some really important suggestions about how to achieve cost efficiency in targeting these repairs and doing it in a grid and ensuring that we have a larger set of jobs done at once rather than doing it in a case-by-case, one repair on this block and one repair on this block. I'm confident that that will realize significant cost savings to do it that way, and I appreciate that suggestion. And I think those were my only comments at this point, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I want to talk to Mr. Johnson again about who's going to do the work, because one thing that I want to make sure that we do is create and produce jobs in Los Angeles in doing this work. You're absolutely right. This is a very significant investment in our public infrastructure, and we ought to make sure that we're keeping that money here in our local economy, creating jobs, hopefully creating job training programs and apprenticeship programs so that people can do this work and actually launch a career by doing this work. So there's a lot more work we still have to do in that regard as well.
And that is possible. Even today at our press conference, Mr. Corcoran with the mayor, I met a street services employee who came from welfare to work, 15 years working today as a city employee, and she credits the apprenticeship program, the city for guiding her, and also all public works projects are under a project labor agreement. And to Mr. Johnson's point, oftentimes when we ask for a cost, the CAO includes indirect costs in that in that price, and that's something that we're looking at here legislatively. And when you come up to looking at the difference between a side-by-side analysis on the cost difference by not including indirect costs, and that's something that the CAO that we're directing the CAO, because it's something that we struggle with moving forward. We'll continue that dialogue, and that's the beauty of leading, helping lead this policy discussion moving forward. So thank you so much, Mr. Krikorian, for your comments. You good? We'll go to those questions. Okay, so with that, thank you to a number of you who submitted questions. At the end, this is we'll direct Ms. Sosa to read the question and then answer those questions that were submitted.
Okay, so I'll start with a question that Councilmember Krikorian sort of touched on just a moment ago. If our property line ends at the beginning of the sidewalk, then the sidewalk belongs to the city. Why not the tree? The property doesn't end at where the sidewalk ends or begins. The sidewalk and tree are on an easement that's owned by the property owner. Is that correct? Okay, the next question. Would you like?
Well, here, the property line actually extends into the street, and the street itself and the sidewalk are built on easements, across the privately owned property of the property owner.
To the middle of the street, right? The center line?
Middle of the street.
The next question. So how will you determine what district need urgent repairs? What area are you looking in to locate these problems, and who can we contact with these issues? So right now we do have a priority order for repairs that's prescribed by the Willett Settlement, and the current priority order for inspections and repairs are city facilities, government offices. The second priority are transportation corridors. The third priority is areas where there's hospitals, medical facilities, assisted living facilities, and other similar facilities. The fourth priority is places of public accommodation, such as commercial and business zones. The fifth priority are facilities containing employers. And the last priority are residential neighborhoods and other areas. So as far as contacting the city for repairs, we recommend you contact 311.
And then I think the proposal, though, is that we would start rating the streets, the sidewalks. Isn't that right? There's going to be some kind of...
So there will be an inspection program, and we'll have to figure out what areas of the city in order for inspections, and I think this here will be a guide to doing so.
All right.
So just to add to this, again, this is this CAO's proposal for a ranking order of priority. Even this priority list is not determined by policy yet, and we're going to have a much more thorough discussion in our collective committee, in our joint committee, and individually about those issues. But the philosophy behind this was to try to get the most bang for our buck with repairs initially that are unquestionably the responsibility of the city. And those are in areas around the public's facilities. Nobody can doubt that the city has the responsibility to do those repairs, number one. And number two, those are the properties that the public most utilizes. Your libraries, your police stations, your parks. We want to make sure that there's as much accessibility in the public's property as possible. And then in the other areas, those are widely trafficked areas with lots of pedestrians who often are senior, disabled, have difficulty getting access to transportation, and so on. I'm having trouble hearing because of the noise in the background, actually. I'd like the gentleman in the back to please be quiet during this public meeting.
Or asked to be removed.
Yeah. And they actually distracted me from my train of thought now. So I guess I'll come back to it when I'm not being distracted. Go ahead.
If the city were to adopt the point of sale option, who would be responsible if a home were to go into foreclosure? So the answer is the buyer, seller would be responsible, and so in the case of a foreclosure, that would potentially be a bank or a buyer. If a point of permit policy is implemented, would a resident be forced to choose between keeping the lights on and getting their sidewalks repaired? This is a good question. Hopefully not. We would try to keep that from happening with other options for financing those repairs. The next question is, property owners will now be responsible for sidewalk repair. Will the city forego the permit fees charged to the property owner? So currently, we have an ordinance that allows for no-fee A permits to be issued. So the city will not collect permit fees for sidewalk repair going forward. It would require an action by the council to change that policy. The next question is, what will be the timeline for property owners and business owners to repair the sidewalks? It will likely take an additional 6 months to a year to develop the program once the city council and mayor make decisions relative to the policy, and residents, if they choose, if they'd like, can begin repairs now. But it's still going to be a while before we actually start enforcing if the policy as proposed is adopted. The next question is, why are churches or nonprofits considered to be commercial? For simplicity, we have distinguished residential properties from commercial. However, further consideration can be given to changing the current definition or allowing for exceptions. If residents are last in line to receive funds under the settlement, when would residential sidewalks be repaired? Under the Willett settlement, the city is required to prioritize $6 million a year, or 20%, for the repair of sidewalks in residential areas.
Thank you. That was the other point that I wanted to make. If you live in a neighborhood that has significant sidewalk damage, call 311 now and put in your request for repairs, because although it's not likely to get done right away, you want to have those complaints in the queue, because one of the things that we're looking at in order to achieve some of the cost efficiency that Mr. Griswold spoke about is a complaint-driven mapping process. So if we have significant number of complaints in a particular area, that area is likely to get prioritized because it's a bigger problem and because there will be more cost efficiency in getting it done. So get your complaints in now, would be my advice. And your neighborhood councils should do likewise, because I think an important role that the neighborhood councils will play in this is to help us identify the highest priorities in your community, because everybody thinks that their block is the highest priority. But so it's the neighborhood council's job to kind of sort that out and say, well, everybody has some damage, but this is the neighborhood that really needs it first. And I think that our neighborhood councils will play a critical role in prioritizing among those
They do, and they should be working closely with the council offices that are going to be funneling these requests in. And so you're right, it's a squeaky wheel that's going to get their grease. And so be loud and be often.
Can you repeat the percentage the lawsuit states that should go to residential, that will go to residential? What's the percentage again?
So it's $6 million per year. That's the unadjusted for inflation amount, but that equates to about 20%.
20% of the sum. Thank you.
So the next question we have is, the settlement calls for the expenditure of $1.4 billion over 30 years. This is a major infrastructure project. Why doesn't the city spend the money up front to develop an operational plan? So we're essentially seeking to do this now by putting together exactly what policy changes we are going to make as a city to provide residents with a sustainable sidewalk repair program. And this is the time for us to do that. Mm-hmm. How much of the city's required expenditures will be made by the city's 3 proprietary departments? So for fiscal year 2015-16, which is going to begin tomorrow, we have budgeted approximately $2 million for the proprietary departments that will be used to fix sidewalks that are adjacent to their facilities.
And they're moving on. I've seen some of the work down at the port.
Yeah,
already.
so like the airports, that's an area that's heavily used by pedestrians, DWP in the harbor. This amount may change from year to year, and it's just going to depend on the demand and how much repairs are needed for sidewalks that are adjacent to their facilities. $2 million. It's that's the estimated amount.
And somewhat related to that, other government entities like the state of California, the school district, other government entities are responsible for the sidewalk sidewalk adjacent to their property as well. And we can, and I think we have begun the process of already starting to instruct them to make the repairs around the policy, which will have a benefit on the system, benefit for all the residents of Los Angeles, and no cost to our city's taxpayers, because that's the obligation of those other government entities.
The next question we have is regarding attorney's fees. What is the source of the $15 million in attorney's fees? When are they due to be paid? So these attorney's fees will be paid from the general fund, and they will be paid after the settlements approved by the court, which has not happened yet, but we expect to happen soon. The next question is, how much will it cost commercial property owners to repair their sidewalks? This really depends on the repair location and size and the cause of the defect. If it's damaged by a tree, that could be more expensive to repair than just simply removing and replacing concrete. The next question is, are commercial property owners who have a residential unit on the property considered a residential property for the program? Under the proposal, a residential property is defined by who collects your trash. If the city collects your trash, we consider you residential. So that's the most simplistic definition of residential and commercial, how we're distinguishing between the two for this proposal. After this enactment, when injuries occur due to inadequate sidewalks, who will be responsible? Will the city share in the responsibility? So under the CAO proposal, after 5 years, the focus on repair will be with the property owner. Liability currently exists with the property owner, and that will not change.
Actually, can you go back one for a second? Because sure. I wanted to ask a question about this too, in distinguishing between commercial and residential property. I get that there's a simple formula in doing it based on trash pickup, but why is it that we can't do it by zoning, distinguishing between residential and commercial zoning? Or why would that be impractical?
We could do that. We just sort of felt that would be the most simplistic way to without being too confusing, to determine the difference between commercial and residential.
Okay.
Thank you. Is that the final question? Thank you so much, Ms. Sosa. At this point, I'd like to invite my colleagues to give some closing remarks, and then we'll adjourn. Mr. Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you for providing this forum. I want to thank neighbors and residents for coming out and expressing your points of view and concerns. As you can hear, still is some work to be done. The policy has not been put to bed yet. Decisions haven't been made firmly, so we are grappling with many of the questions that you raised this evening. Who's going to pay for it? How does it get paid? Who's going to get the work? We certainly want to support our city workforce, but we also want to provide some opportunities for small businesses that could probably do some of this work as well. Issues associated with tree damage, issues associated with safety, mobility. So I'm just glad that we are continuing to have this discussion, Mr. Chairman, and the fact that we've got some money behind it now. And I think a commitment from those of us on these joint committees and as in the body as a whole, realizing that we've got to do a better job in maintaining these sidewalks and working with businesses and neighbors to in a collaborative way, make resources available to make that happen. So I'm glad to be part of this discussion, and thanks for the comments that were made this evening. They're very helpful.
Thank you for hosting us, Mr. Price. Happy to be in your district, sir. Mr. Krikorian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just first wanted to thank everybody for participating in this process. I said it before, I'll reiterate as many times as I can, that what we have before us is a proposal that is merely a touchstone for further discussion. And the CAO has worked hard on this, and so has a whole working group of people within the city, of city departments and our offices and others who've tried to put as many policy options on the table as we could and refine them. But this is only the beginning of the discussion, and Mr. Buscaino and I have committed to having public meetings throughout the city and then bringing your input back into this discussion about how to have a policy that's sustainable and that will result in every sidewalk in the city being repaired. And that's our goal. We take it very seriously. We expect to achieve it, but we can't really achieve it in a way that is going to work for the long term unless we have the public's input into it. So I really appreciate all of you coming and participating, the great questions that were asked and the suggestions that were offered. At the end of the day, you know, the simple truth is the city's leadership for the last 40 years has been afraid to grapple with this issue.
Right.
I mean, that's the bottom line. We are where we are because of fearfulness on the part of the city's leadership to deal with the really hard questions that we've asked and that you've all asked tonight. One way or the other, this is going to be an expensive proposition, but it's an essential proposition. We must have accessible sidewalk infrastructure throughout the city if we want to have a pedestrian-friendly, bicycle-friendly communities that have good quality of life. It's essential. There's only two ways. The money doesn't come from the air. One way or the other, the people end up paying for this, one way or the other. And so if you have a pristine sidewalk in front of your house, in front of your property, you're probably going to want to impose the cost of this, of sidewalk repairs on the homeowner because it's not going to come out of your wallet. If you have a broken sidewalk in front of your house, and someone mentioned earlier, I think it was you mentioned the cost of removing the tree, you're definitely going to want to impose that cost on the taxpayers, not on the property owner. This is the challenge in coming up with a policy that works. So at the end of the day, the money can only come from the people, either in out of tax resources that we have now, or out of reduction in services, or otherwise. There's no other way around that. So our goal is to find the way that costs the people the least, creates the greatest cost efficiency, the greatest fairness across communities, and that results in every sidewalk in the city being repaired. And that's the challenge before us. I appreciate your all being here and helping us to meet that challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Krikorian. And we've said this before, public infrastructure, streets, sidewalks, street lighting, and trees are the most visible form of local government. And I'll actually take it further, Paul, that failed leadership took us to where we're at today. In fact, the city council then in the early 70s went against Mayor Tom Bradley, and then the then CEO advised to move on that policy on taking the responsibility of the tree root exception. So we're here today, and I'm proud to stand with my colleagues to lead this the policy discussion on a 40-year-old problem. I appreciate each and every one of you. It's our commitment to each and every one of you to get some insight from the community, neighborhood councils, businesses, and residents. Appreciate your feedback, and for the listening audience, our final three public hearings on the sidewalk issue will be held on Tuesday, July 28th in West Los Angeles at the Mar Vista Rec Center. Wednesday, July 29th at the Eagle Rock at the Center of the Performing Arts. And our fifth and final hearing will be held in San Fernando Valley at the Van Nuys City Hall on Thursday, July 30th. All meetings will be held at 6 p.m. Want to credit Mr. Krikorian's office for putting together this great flyer. And thank you to our City Hall staff for bringing City Hall to the people here in South Los Angeles. CAO, CLA's office, thank you so much for your hard work on this, and looking forward to continuing this discussion moving forward. Thank you. Have a blessed and safe night. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, Joe. Thank you. Good luck. Yeah, but that's not because of where the property line is. That's because of the technical requirements needed. And see, and I really enjoyed your thoughts.
We need retention ponds around every road.
I hope we've learned our lesson. I hope we've learned our lesson on trees.
And some trees are worse than others. They can't let the tree surgery comes in.
Right.